Hello and welcome to Mortiego's very epic Blood DPS guide. In this video, I'll be going over everything you need to know to play Blood DPS to the best of its ability. From race and talents to rotation and BiS lists, I will be covering it all so you can prove to everyone that Blood can indeed pump. So without further ado, let's get right into it, starting with the races. For the races, it's the same for most if not all DPS specs. Your best race will be Troll then Orc for Horde, and Draenei then Human for Alliance. Your stat priority is pretty comparable to a Frost Death Knight, prioritizing hit to 8 or 9% for the spell hit, strength, armor pen, expertise, crit, and haste. Haste being very much your worst stat compared to the other 5. With armor pen items becoming more readily available in Icecrown Citadel and epic gems being released in the previous tier, in ICC, armor pen becomes your second best stat up to the hard cap of 1260, assuming you have the Blood Gorge talent, as well as expertise rising in value up to its respective cap as well. On to the talents, starting with the Blood Tree, we want to take Butchery and Subversion for a 9% Heart Strike crit chance. Then we can move down to Bladed Armor, turning all of our plate gear into attack power, and then 200 weapon spec, which is just 4% damage. Dark Conviction will be 5% crit chance for everything we do, and then a very big talent here in Death Rune Mastery. This will make every Death Strike we cast turn the Frost and Unholy Rune we just used into Death Runes that we can use to cast Heart Strike later. We can go down to Bloody Strikes here. This will give us 45% Heart Strike damage and 30% Blood Boil damage, helping us a little bit of AoE. And then we can take Veteran the Third War, which is basically just a stat talent. Bloody Vengeance here is a stacking buff that stacks up a 9% physical damage increase. Abomination Smite is a 10% attack power bonus for everyone in your raid and a 2% strike bonus for yourself. Of course, we take Hysteria here, and then we go Bloodworms. These only amount to about 2% of your total damage during your raid, but more importantly, they keep you alive to keep you above 75% for Blood Gorged. We take Sudden Doom just for some free death coils. Improved Death Strike for 30% increased Death Strike damage, 6% increased critical chance, and increase the healing just a little bit, again, for Blood Gorged. Then we go Heart Strike, Might of Morgraine, increasing the critical strike damage of basically everything we use. And now we have a choice to make with one extra point to put into whatever we want to unlock Blood Gorged and Dancing Rune Weapon. I recommend taking Mark of Blood or Vampiric Blood. Mark of Blood is better for your raid healing or keeping your tank alive. And then Vampiric Blood is more for yourself to survive raid mechanics. You can also take Scent of Blood or Improved Blood Presence, but I would recommend going with Mark of Blood here. And then of course we finish off with 5 out of 5 Blood Gorged and Dancing Rune Weapon. Moving on to the Unholy Tree, we want to take 2 out of 2 Vicious Strikes, which isn't a great talent for us, but it's something we need to get down further into the tree. And we want to take 3 out of 3 Virulence for our spell hit, 3% spell hit. 2 out of 2 Epidemic, just so our diseases last longer. 3 out of 3 Ravenous Dead, gives us some strength, and our Ghoul some strength. 5 out of 5 Necrosis, just makes our auto attacks hit that much harder. And then Blood Cake Blade for the same reason, and then finish off with Night of the Dead. Now some people might remember a time where 2 out of 3 Morbidity was taken over Night of the Dead, and you would be remembering correctly. But from an offhand comment from my guild lead saying Death Coil is a dog filler, caused me to look into some possible changes into the talent, where after some simming where the damage was higher overall with Night of the Dead and some practical real world testing to find out that the 90% damage reduction applies to the Guardian Ghoul, not just the Pet Ghoul as the tooltip would have you believe, allowing it to survive raid mechanics. These 2 points being changed into Night of the Dead will provide you with more DPS than 2 out of 3 Morbidity. Although, as a disclaimer, on some fights such as Ignis, your Ghoul will still die due to the fact that, while yes, it still reduces the AoE portion of Flame Jets, the dot that gets applied is still considered single target and does not get mitigated. In cases like these, you do want to go back to 2 out of 3 Morbidity, otherwise you are losing a substantial amount of DPS. There's also a very niche Frost Subspec build. This build does provide better AoE potential on 5+ mobs at the cost of your single target DPS, but this talent setup is crucial for one boss, that being a Nubarak. With this setup, we'll still be using Death Strike for most of the fight, but switching to Obliterate in Phase 3 as to not grief our raid by using Death Strike while Leeching Swarm is out. Nubarak also happens to be a fight with a lot of consistent AoE where this spec might perform better than the Unholy variant anyways. Your best glyphs for the entire expansion are going to be Glyph of Dancing Rune Weapon, Disease, and Death Strike on the major slots, and then for the minor slots we're going to go with Glyph of Blood Tap, Pestilence, and Raise Dead. Your best profession will always be Engineering for hyperspeed accelerators, being an amazing 1 minute cooldown, Global Thermal Sapper charges and Serenite bombs, which are basically just free damage, and Nitro boots are providing more value to you practically in a raid than any sim could ever show you by allowing you to reposition quickly and avoid raid mechanics. Your best secondary profession will be jewel crafting, but once epic gems are introduced you can consider blacksmithing, but they're so close in the numbers to where I wouldn't bother switching them around and only have blacksmithing if you happen to be that originally. Consumables are going to be Endless Rage for the flask, Dragonfin Fillet for the food buff, making sure you're using this over Fish Feast as you'll get more AP from it, and speed potions for your potions. But you can use indestructible potions on fights where pre-potting is extremely awkward, like Freya, Algalon, or Yogg-Saron. Blood will have two openers, a standard opener and a double disease opener. They are extremely similar and only have a change of one ability, so it shouldn't be hard to swap between the two. I'll explain when and why you make the change later, but starting with the standard opener, we'll begin with Army of the Dead and Unholy Presence 10 seconds before the pull, then swapping back to Blood Presence. Hysteria, Racial, Hyperspeed Accelerators, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Death Strike, Heart Strike twice, Empower Rune Weapon into Ghoul, Dancing Rune Weapon, Death Strike, Heart Strike, Blood Tap, Cancel Aura, Heart Strike 5 times, Pestilence. I highly recommend practicing this opener on a dummy for a while, as performing this well is key to your success because most of your damage, as with most classes, is front-loaded into your opener. For the double disease opener, it's exactly like the previous one, but instead of using Death Strike after Dancing Rune Weapon, you use your diseases. The effectiveness of this opener will change with your gear. Earlier into the expansion, it will more than likely be higher, falling off in later tiers. Just be sure to sim your gear to know which one to use. If you don't know, just stick with the standard opener. On a side note, with Sigil of Virulence in TOGC, if your first Death Strike in your opener didn't proc your trinket, you should do the standard opener even if the double diseases sims higher, because proccing that trinket is a very high priority, and doing double diseases obviously doesn't give you a second shot at proccing your trinket. The rotation is very easy, and it's a simple priority system. Use your runes as they come off cooldown on the appropriate abilities, making sure to refresh your diseases with Pestilence at about 2 seconds left of the duration. Then use Death Coil when runes are on cooldown, and remember, it's okay to overcap on Rune Power, it's going to happen, don't worry about it, that's fine. And then use Horn of Winter if literally nothing else is available. For your AoE rotation, it's as straightforward as putting your diseases up, spreading them with Pestilence, using Death Strike to make death runes, and then casting Blood Boil on 5 or more mobs and Heart Strike on 4 or less. Make sure you're using Dancing Rune Weapon during trash if applicable, and apply Dancing Rune Weapon's diseases to get its maximum Blood Boil damage. Before I show a clip of the opener and single target rotation in action, I want to give a quick overview of the Rune Grace Period mechanic, so when I mention it during the rotation demonstration, you know what I'm talking about. Rune Grace Period is a mechanic for Death Knights that essentially allows them to use their filler spells while their runes are available without the need to worry about using your runes exactly when they come off cooldown. So, everyone knows that runes have a 10-second recharge time. You use Heart Strike, and 10 seconds later, that rune comes back. But, while in combat, once your rune comes off cooldown and is available again, that rune will immediately start its cooldown like you had used it the moment it was available up to 7.5 seconds left of the cooldown. So, whenever a rune comes off cooldown, you have 2.5 seconds to use any other ability or action until you're missing out on rune cooldowns. Here I'm going to show you the standard opener and one cycle of Pestilence to give you more context and visibility of the single target rotation, as well as how to use your cooldowns while in combat and not just during the opener. In the lower middle portion of the screen you can see what abilities I'm using to help follow along. So I'm not going to be using Army, but after that we use all our cooldowns, Icy Touch, Plague Strike, Death Strike, Heart Strike twice, Empower Rune Weapon, Ghoul, Dancing Rune Weapon, Death Strike, Heart Strike, Blood Tap, Cancel Aura, Heart Striking 5 times, finishing off with Pestilence. We can go 2 Death Coils because of Rune Grace Period, Heart Striking twice, 2 Death Strikes, and it just simple rotation like this basically just follows that order here. We can Horn there, and it's just like this. So with our cooldowns coming back up, we want to make sure of 3 things. 1, that our current runes are on cooldown, we have enough runic power, and our trinkets are procced. So all that being there, we use our cooldowns, Dancing Rune Weapon, and just like that, just get back to it. Simple as that. I want to talk a little bit more about Dancing Rune Weapon, and I'm going to start with Snapshotting. Now I'm sure you've heard of Snapshotting, but just in case you haven't, here's a brief explanation. When applying a dot or summoning a unit such as Dancing Rune Weapon, the game will snapshot your current stats that said ability or summon scales with or benefits from, and this ability or summon will keep those stats for its duration, regardless of if your stats change or buffs fall off. Dancing Rune Weapon deals with haste, crit, attack power, and percent damage increases. So the idea with snapshotting is using these cooldowns or abilities when your stats are at their maximum so your ability or summon gets the most out of them as possible. The ideal case being with all your trinket procs, buffs, cooldowns, and bloodlust are active on you at the same time. Your trinkets are on a 45-second cooldown, while Dancing Rune Weapon is a 1 minute 30-second cooldown, meaning every other trinket proc you can cast Dancing Rune Weapon and snapshot them, while every other Dancing Rune Weapon usage can be snapshotted with Hysteria as well, with it being a 3-minute cooldown. Dancing Rune Weapon has a unique interaction with Pestilence, where if you have your diseases running on a target, you summon Dancing Rune Weapon and then cast Pestilence while there is another target in range. Dancing Rune Weapon will apply its own diseases without the need of using Icy Touch or Plague Strike. When attempting to spread diseases with Dancing Rune Weapon on 2 or more targets, it is optimal to use Pestilence twice rather than manually using Icy Touch and Plague Strike and then casting Pestilence. While for most of the expansion, applying Dancing Rune Weapon's diseases manually with Icy Touch and Plague Strike or the previously mentioned Pestilence Trick will be optimal, at some point during your gearing in Icecrown Citadel, you'll notice on the sim that applying diseases at all will result in a DPS loss. Barring a perfect Pestilence Trick where you summon Dancing Rune Weapon and immediately refresh your personal diseases as they were falling off. This is because Dancing Rune Weapon does not scale with your armor pin, so while your personal damage is rising, Dancing Rune Weapon relative to you does not. Being close to not if exactly 50% damage in Nax, the more armor pin you get, the more that 50% decreases up to a point where using the globals on spreading diseases is a DPS loss instead of just casting Death or Heart Strike. This does not apply to any multi-target scenarios using Blood Boil, as Blood Boil is shadow damage, not physical. Blood DPS is a simple spec, so not many WeakAuras, add-ons, or macros should be required. As long as you have a way to easily see your disease durations with something like Plater, and a way to see your trinkets and Fallen Crusader procs for snapshotting, you're good to go. And if you want, here's a macro that casts all of your cooldowns, although I recommend having Hysteria, Racial, Gloves, and Potions all on separate keybinds, as there are times you may want to cast those by themselves. There's also a next action WeakAura created by Fonzus that shows you what ability you should be casting next. While it is a very impressive display of automation and usage of the WeakAura add-on, I personally do not recommend actually using it and relying on it unless you're the raid lead and your brain power is being used elsewhere, as I feel it can hinder the ability to actually learn and play a spec, but that is just me, you can use it if you want to. Some of the BiS lists I'm about to show, while not being technical BiS, I feel are more realistic and closer to my personal playstyle of 9% hit and 6.5% expertise wherever possible. While these personal restrictions do lower the ceiling of your damage, they also raise the floor, causing less variance in your overall performance, and I feel like the difference is so minor that it shouldn't matter too much. These lists will also not include anything other than plate and strength items unless there's no other option or does not come from a 25-man raid. The lists in Trial of the Grand Crusader and onwards are also subject to change, as they were made pre-Dancing Rune Weapon fixes. While the list may be close to BiS, there could be some minor adjustments that could happen. To keep up with that, be sure to join the Blood DPS Discord to know if there are any changes that get made. And lastly, some of these lists I may just get wrong. I am only one person sitting at my computer at 3 AM making these lists. I'm bound to get something wrong. So, I implore you to take these lists and make them better if you think you can. Otherwise, I'm at least confident in saying these lists are close enough. While pre-raid gearing and Nax are long gone at the time of recording, I want to go over them quickly for completion's sake. For pre-raid, most items are pretty easy to get, with them being crafted, BOE, or bought with badges. The only difficult pieces would be Staggering Leg Plates, Band of Frosted Thorns, Gold Amulet of Kings, and Ring of the Kirin Tor. You can swap out Ring of the Kirin Tor with any other DPS ring, such as Titanium Impact Band or Stained Glass Shard Ring, both being BOE, or Hemorrhaging Circle or Mobius Band. I recommend Mobius Band for Horde to reach the hit cap. The Nax list looks like this. Note the 2 etched strength hit gems in the shoulders and gloves. This allows us to hit our 8% hit cap. Items you can look at replacing without much hassle are Great Ring of Collision for Circle of Death, Doing so will also get your expertise closer to the cap. For Horde, I recommend swapping the shoulders and legs for tier pieces while keeping the strength hit gem in the glove slot. In Ulduar, my personal list looks like this. This list is heavily personalized for hitting 9% hit and 6.5% expertise, and this is also where being human has its biggest impact, with Ulduar being the BiS weapon, so we can benefit much more from our racials. Notice the expertise defense gem in the legs along with the 2 expertise gems in the boots. These can be swapped out with strength crit and pure strength respectively, but as I said, I like getting the caps where possible. Also notice the strength stam gem in the legs. Because the socket bonus is good enough on these legs to do so, we can also change our meta gem from Relentless Earthsiege to Chaotic Skyflare because DK scale better with critical strike rating rather than agility. Also, Sif's Promise is not technically BiS. This is another item I'm using to hit expertise cap. You can swap this with Brand Signet Ring being the best item, or Strength of the Automaton or Brand Sealing Ring as other options. If your Horde list looks exactly the same, just changing any hit and expertise gems accordingly. Items you really want to try and get for next phase are Armbands of Bedlam, Belt of Colossal Rage, and Mjolnir Runestone. Trials where blood DPS can really start to shine due to gear and fights being pretty favorable for them. And luckily, the BiS lists for both Horde and Alliance are still the same again, barring some gem changes. In the Alliance set specifically, we have one 10 strength 10 hit gem and one 20 expertise gem. And again, don't forget, you can swap the expertise gem if pure strength stems higher, and that's what you want to do. Horde is pretty much the same, the only difference being we have 2 20 hit yellows as well as the 20 expertise gem. Other than that, it's the same gear. And for both sets, everything here is pretty straightforward. In this tier as well, we can start filling in yellow sockets with orange gems, but not any blue sockets. Some notes on a few items though. The cape and 258 tier are extremely difficult to get. If you cannot get the heroic 25-man cloak, you can just spring for the 10-man version and socket a 10 strength 10 hit gem instead. As for 258 tier, you're probably not going to get 4 pieces, if any of it at all. In the case you do get any, your best 258 piece is your legs, then your helm, and shoulders and chest are around the same. Keep in mind as well, Sigil of Virulence is your best sigil possibly throughout the rest of the expansion. This is your highest priority item and you can get it basically for free. Desveric as well is going to be another hot ticket yet BiS item for the next tier. In ICC, we start gymming for the armor penetration cap of 1260 with our Blood Gorge talent. Basically every gem in here is 20 armor penetration other than the 20 hit gem in the boots and the 10 expertise 10 hit gem in the belt, because these have the best socket bonuses. And then a 10 strength, 10 crit gem, and basically any other yellow since they're all the same. This is also the time where we switch from 40 strength food to 40 armor pen food to reach the hard cap. Of course Shadowmourne is going to be your best weapon in ICC, but you can't expect that you're going to get it. In that case, your next best weapon is Glorrenzelg, but when we swap to Glorrenzelg we have 2 things happen. We have way too much expertise and we no longer reach the armor penetration cap. We can't solve the problems, but we can stem the bleeding on both issues. We still use armor penetration food and gems, but we still can't reasonably hit the cap. For the expertise problem, we can fix it by swapping our legs to Scourge Reaver's leg plates. For Horde, things are very similar, only difference in items is that the belt was changed to Flesh Shaper's Gurney Strap from 10-man heroic, and there's some slight gem changes with only one 10 expertise 10 hit gem and a 20 strength gem. Keep in mind going forward for any Horde list, if you're an orc, you'll be getting more expertise from your racial. So in that case, ungem some expertise and swap the legs out for Scourge Reaver's leg plates. Just make sure you're as close to 6.5% expertise as possible. Same for Horde. Shadowmourne is the best weapon, but it's not realistic to think you're going to get it. We're also going for Glorrenzelg for Horde, and in this case again, we change any gems that we can to 20 armor pen and swap the leggings while still using armor pen food. In Ruby Sanctum, only a few things change. We're going to go for Penumbra Pendant, Apocalypse's Advance, and Sharpened Twilight Scale, as well as changing our ring from Might of Blight to Skeleton Lord's Circle. So if you can get your hands on that in ICC for now, then do so. Because we get a little more armor pen in this phase, we can start gemming some of the better socket bonuses with orange gems, and some of the red gems can go back to strength. It doesn't matter if you do 2 strength gems and armor pen food, or 2 armor pen gems and strength food, it's going to be the same stats. For the yellow sockets though, I have a 20 hit yellow in the gloves and a 10 strength 10 hit gem in the belt because these are our best bonuses, and then a 10 strength 10 crit which can go in any other yellow socket. For Gloranzelg, we're taking what we did in ICC and expanding on it. Luckily in this phase, if you have Gloranzelg, you can hit the armor pin hard cap now. It just takes some finagling with your gems. There's a 10 strength, 10 crit gem in the belt for the socket bonus, and we also have a 10 expertise, 10 defense in the legs, because we don't need the hit, a 20 expertise red, as well as a 10 armor pen, 15 stam purple. If we use a 20 armor pen gem here, we would be 10 over the cap, so we're taking the socket bonus instead. And in doing so, we can swap our meta gem to Chaotic Skyflare Diamond for the slightly better crit scaling. We're also changing Skeleton Lord Circle back to Might of Blight for expertise reasons. And lastly, all of our strength reds we had go to armor pen. With Horde, most changes are the same except for a few things. We're still switching the same items out, Penumbra Pendant, Apocalypse's Advance, and Sharpened Twilight Scale, as well as Skeleton Lord Circle. One thing different is now we're using Cold Wraith Flanks instead of Flesh Shaper's Gurney's Trap. Again, we're still using armor pen food, but you have 4 strength gems with a 10 strength, 10 crit gem orange in our belt. Again for Gloranzelg, we're trying our best to stem the bleeding on our armor pen and expertise. We're still using armor pen food, and we have a 20 expertise gem in our belt, then the leggings with 10 expertise, 10 hit, 20 expertise, and 10 armor pen, 15 stam, socketing a chaotic skyflare again. Then every other gem with 20 armor pen. One last thing I want to mention about BiS lists in general. In most scenarios, you will not be receiving every item on your BiS list, be it you're not prioritized or it just doesn't drop. You need to be flexible and adapt to the items you have and can or can't get. For example, in Trial of the Grand Crusader, if you don't have Colossal Rage and your guild isn't doing Iron Council anymore, you can go Bloodbath Belt, Sabatons, and Seal of the Betrayed King over Carnivorous Band. And if you don't have Seal, you can just gem more hit. You can do a lot of things to work around not having items, and it is a good skill to have when playing WoW and MMOs in general. I hope this video explained everything you wanted to know about the spec. If you have any further questions, feel free to join the Blood DPS Discord server and ask around. It has resources and people willing to help with anything else you might need. I want to give a quick shout out to Incan for vetting this guide and making sure all the information is correct. Check out his channel for high level PvE and PvP gameplay of Blood DPS. I'd also like to thank White Wolf and Sarth, both for bringing attention to Blood DPS, enough to get Blizzard's eyes on the spec and get Dancing Rune weapon fixed. As well as Rain for all of his time and effort put into the Blood DPS sim. Without him, I wouldn't have had a lot of this data used in this video. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for watching.